All right, so today we're tackling something I think we can all relate to, handling disrespect. You know, those moments when someone's behavior just rubs you the wrong way and you're kind of left wondering how to respond without losing your cool. And you shared a YouTube video with us called 5 Ways to Handle People Who Don't Respect You. And it really caught my eye because it approaches these situations through a Stoic philosophy lens.
That's a great choice.
Yeah.
Stoicism, while rooted in ancient philosophy, is surprisingly relevant to the challenges we face in our modern lives. It offers a unique perspective on navigating those tricky social dynamics and maintaining our inner peace.
Exactly. And the video starts off strong with a strategy called Embrace the Silent Stare. It's all about using silence and eye contact to disarm someone who's being disrespectful. Now, I've heard this before, but I'm curious to hear your take on the psychology behind it. Why is it so effective?
It's fascinating. Really think about it. Someone who disrespects you often wants a reaction. They thrive on seeing you get flustered or upset. It feeds their need for control or validation. But when you meet their disrespect with a calm, steady gaze, you disrupt that pattern entirely. You're not giving them the fuel they're looking for.
The video even shares a story about a guy in a meeting who kept interrupting the speaker. And when they just stared at him silently, he became so uncomfortable that he actually stopped interrupting. And get this, he ended up treating the speaker with more respect afterward.
That perfectly illustrates the power dynamic shift that can happen with the silent stare. Instead of reacting emotionally, you're asserting your presence and boundaries in a way that throws the other person off balance. It can be incredibly disarming. And as you mentioned, it can even lead to a more respectful interaction in the long run.
It almost seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Like we're often told to stand up for ourselves verbally, but sometimes saying nothing can be the most powerful response that actually leads us to the video's next strategy, which is all about embracing silence as your answer.
Yes, and this is where Stoicism really shines. One of its core principles is choosing your battles wisely. Stoics recognize that not every slight or insult deserves a response. Sometimes the most strategic move is to conserve our energy and simply refuse to engage in negativity that doesn't serve us.
The video uses the example of someone dealing with a person who constantly made those backhanded jokes disguised as humor by choosing not to react. They took away the power the person was trying to gain from those comments. Have you ever been in a situation where saying nothing felt more powerful than engaging in a back and forth?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all encountered those people who seem to thrive on drama and negativity. But when we refuse to give them the reaction they're seeking, we're essentially taking back control of the situation. It's about recognizing that our energy is precious and we don't have to waste it on people who don't deserve it.
That's such a powerful reminder, and it makes me wonder, how do we know when to embrace silence and when to speak up? Is there a balance to be struck?
That's a great question. It really depends on the situation and the individual involved. Stoicism isn't about becoming passive or letting people walk all over us. It's about discerning when our words will have a positive impact and when they might simply add fuel to the fire.
So it's about being intentional with our responses rather than just reacting impulsively. I like that. Now the next point in the video really intrigued me. It's about stopping explaining our choices. It argues that we often feel obligated to justify our decisions to others even when we don't owe them an explanation.
That's such a common struggle, isn't it? We can get caught up in seeking approval or validation from others, especially when making big life changes. But the truth is, the more we explain ourselves, the more we open ourselves up to judgment and doubt.
The video gives the example of someone who switched careers and faced a barrage of questions from people who seemed more focused on critiquing their decision than understanding it. Simply saying, "because I wanted to," felt incredibly empowering.
That resonates with the Stoic emphasis on self-reliance. They believe that true freedom comes from living authentically, aligning our choices with our own values and aspirations, rather than trying to please or appease others. It's about recognizing that our lives are our own, and we don't need to seek permission or approval to make choices that feel right for us.
This feels especially relevant in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with opinions and expectations from social media and other external sources. It's easy to lose sight of our own inner compass amidst all the noise.
Exactly. Stoicism reminds us to focus on what's truly important, living in alignment with our values, and not getting caught up in the opinions of others. It's a powerful antidote to the pressure to conform or seek external validation.
So how do we break free from that need to over-explain ourselves? It's almost like a habit for some of us.
It starts with recognizing our own inherent worthiness. We don't need to justify our existence or our choices to anyone. We have the right to live our lives on our own terms, and that includes making decisions that might not make sense to others.
That's such a liberating thought, but sometimes it's not enough to just assert boundaries verbally. There are situations where we might need to take a step back physically to protect our well-being, which brings us to the video's next point.
Keep your distance. Absolutely. Stoicism emphasizes discerning what is within our control, and that includes who we allow into our inner circle. Sometimes creating distance, even temporarily, is necessary for our mental and emotional health.
The video shared a story about someone who had a friend who was constantly making snide comments, and they realized that limiting contact actually improved their mental well-being. They acknowledged the guilt that often comes with distancing ourselves from people, especially those we care about, but ultimately recognized that it was the healthiest choice for them.
It's crucial to remember that we have a choice in who we allow to influence our lives. And sometimes that means creating distance from people who consistently bring negativity or disrespect into our space. This doesn't mean we have to cut them out of our lives entirely, but it does mean being mindful of how much energy we invest in the relationship.
This makes me think about those relationships where there's a sense of obligation, like with certain family members or longtime friends. It can feel incredibly difficult to set boundaries in those situations.
You're absolutely right. It can be challenging, especially when there are long-standing dynamics or cultural expectations at play. But Stoicism reminds us that true friendship and healthy relationships are rooted in mutual respect and support.
If those elements are missing, then it might be time to reevaluate the role those relationships play in our lives, even if it means taking a step back for our own well-being. It's not about being unkind, it's about prioritizing our own peace and growth.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we deserve to be treated with respect, and we have the right to create an environment where that respect is a given.
And sometimes that involves making tough choices about the people we allow into our lives.
It does, but those choices can be incredibly empowering. They allow us to create space for relationships that uplift and support us rather than drain our energy and diminish our sense of self.
So we've talked about the power of silence, setting boundaries, and recognizing our own worthiness. But the video takes it a step further by suggesting that our physical presence can also play a role in how we handle disrespect.
That leads us to the final point. Hold your head high.
This seems simple, but I'm curious to hear how you interpret it through the lens of Stoic philosophy.
You know, as we were discussing before, the way we carry ourselves can send a powerful message to the world. And Stoics understood this well. Holding our heads high, both literally and figuratively, is about projecting an air of confidence and self-respect.
I love that it's like you're saying, I'm not going to let you shrink me. I know my worth, and I'm not afraid to show it. The video even mentions how those who are disrespectful often target people they perceive as weak or insecure.
Exactly, and this ties beautifully into the Stoic principle of focusing on what we can control. We can't control how others behave, but we can control how we present ourselves to the world. When we stand tall and maintain a confident posture, we're essentially taking back control of the situation.
So it's not just about physical posture, is it? It's also about cultivating that inner strength and resilience that allows us to brush off negativity and not let it get to us.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about that unshakable belief in ourselves that comes from within, not from seeking external validation. It's about knowing who we are and what we stand for, and not letting anyone's words or actions diminish our sense of self.
This makes me think about those times when we've been in situations where someone's trying to get a rise out of us, and sometimes the most effective response is to simply not give them the satisfaction, almost like we're saying, your words don't have power over me.
Precisely by not reacting in the way they expect we disrupt their game. They're used to seeing people crumble or get defensive, and when we don't, it throws them off balance.
It's a powerful reminder that we always have a choice in how we respond. We can either let disrespect dictate our emotions and behavior, or we can choose to rise above it.
And that choice is incredibly empowering. It allows us to reclaim our power and not be a victim of someone else's negativity.
You know, this conversation has really helped me to understand the deeper psychology behind why people might be disrespectful in the first place. The video touches on this as well, suggesting that often it's not really about us at all.
Right. It's a fascinating insight. The video argues that when someone is trying to put you down or make you question yourself, it's often because they are insecure about their own choices or threatened by your independence.
It's like they're projecting their own insecurities onto us, almost as a way to make themselves feel better.
Precisely. It's a defense mechanism. They might be feeling inadequate or threatened in some way, and by trying to diminish you, they're attempting to level the playing field.
The video uses the example of someone who made a career change and was bombarded with questions from people who seemed less genuinely curious and more focused on criticizing their choice. It almost felt like those questions were rooted in the questioner's own anxieties about their own career path.
It's a classic example of how disrespect can often be a reflection of the other person's own struggles, rather than a genuine assessment of your worth or decisions.
So, how do we deal with that? It's easy to get defensive or feel the need to over explain ourselves in those situations.
Stoicism would suggest that instead of getting caught up in their negativity, we focus on what we can control our own thoughts and actions. We can choose to not take their comments personally and recognize that their behavior is likely stemming from their own internal battles.
It's about recognizing that we don't need anyone's permission to live our lives the way we want to. And it's about understanding that their reaction is often a reflection of their own insecurities, not a reflection of our worth.
Exactly. It's a powerful shift in perspective that can liberate us from the need to seek external validation or prove ourselves to others.
This brings us back to that Stoic principle of focusing on what's within our control. We can't control other people's reactions, but we can control how we respond to them.
And sometimes the most powerful response is simply to refuse to engage in their negativity.
So we've talked about recognizing our own worth, setting boundaries verbally, and understanding the motivations behind disrespectful behavior. But what about those situations where those strategies aren't enough and we need to take a more decisive step back?
You're talking about distancing ourselves from people who consistently disrespect us. And it's important to acknowledge that this can be a difficult decision, especially when it involves people we care about.
The video acknowledges that there's often a sense of guilt or obligation that comes with distancing ourselves, particularly when it comes to family or longtime friends.
Absolutely, we might feel like we're being disloyal or abandoning them, but it's crucial to remember that true friends and healthy relationships are based on mutual respect.
And if that respect is consistently lacking, then it might be necessary to reevaluate the role that person plays in our lives, even if it means creating some distance.
That's right. It's not about being unkind or cutting them out of our lives completely. It's about being mindful of how much energy we invest in the relationship and setting boundaries to protect our own well-being.
This might look different for everyone. For some, it might mean limiting contact, being less available, or declining invitations that don't feel good.
Exactly. And for others, it might mean being more selective about the topics they discuss or the activities they engage in together. It's about finding what works best for you and creating a space where you feel safe and respected.
And if the other person questions our distance, we can simply say something like, "I've been focusing on other things lately," or "I need some time to myself right now."
Right. We don't owe them a detailed explanation. It's about prioritizing our own needs and creating healthy boundaries in our relationships. And sometimes that distance allows for personal growth and reflection, which can ultimately strengthen the relationship in the long run.
This whole conversation about distancing ourselves from people who disrespect us leads us back to that idea of self-respect and how it's reflected in our physical presence.
Hold your head high.
Yeah.
Such a powerful image, isn't it?
It is, and it really ties everything together. It's about projecting that inner confidence and self-assuredness that makes people think twice about messing with you.
It's about asserting your presence in the world and refusing to be diminished by anyone's words or actions. It's about owning your space and projecting an aura of confidence that can actually deter people from disrespecting you.
The video mentions how people who are disrespectful often target those they perceive as weak or insecure. So by holding our heads high, both literally and figuratively, we're sending a clear message that we're not an easy target.
Exactly. It's like we're saying, I see you, I'm aware of your tactics, and they're not going to work on me. It disrupts their power dynamic and can actually make them feel uncomfortable because they're not getting the reaction they were hoping for.
It's so fascinating how our physical presence can have such a profound impact on how others perceive and treat us. It's a reminder that we have more agency than we realize.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just physical posture. It's about cultivating that inner strength and resilience that allows us to brush off negativity and not let it get to us.
It's about recognizing that our worth comes from within, not from external validation.
Exactly. It's about knowing who we are and what we stand for and not letting anyone shake our confidence in ourselves.
You're right. It's one thing to talk about these Stoic strategies in the abstract, but it's another thing to actually apply them in the heat of the moment. So let's get down to brass tacks. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone keeps interrupting you or dismissing your ideas. How could you use the silent stare effectively in that situation?
It's all about taking a breath and maintaining your composure. You don't want to react defensively or try to talk over them. Instead, simply stop speaking make direct eye contact, and hold their gaze for a few seconds. It might feel a bit awkward at first, but that awkwardness is often what throws the other person off.
That makes sense. It's like you're non-verbally calling them out on their behavior without escalating the situation.
Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself using the silent stare?
More times than I can count, and it's surprisingly effective. People often don't realize how their behavior comes across until they're confronted with it in a calm, direct way. It forces them to self-reflect, which can sometimes lead to a more respectful interaction.
Okay, so let's say you're dealing with someone who's a master of those passive-aggressive comments that just drive you up the wall. How can you apply the embracing silence as your answer technique in that scenario?
It's all about remembering that their goal is to get a reaction out of you. They want to see you get flustered or defensive, but by choosing to remain silent, you're essentially taking away their power. You're not giving them the satisfaction of seeing you ruffled.
So don't give them the fuel for their fire. Just let their comment hang in the air and move on with the conversation. It's a way of saying your words don't have any impact on me without actually having to say a word.
Exactly. And that silence can often speak volumes. It conveys a sense of confidence and self-assurance that can make the other person feel rather foolish for even making the comment in the first place. Sometimes the most powerful statements are made in silence.
This reminds me of a time when I was dealing with someone who was constantly questioning my decisions, especially about a career change I had made. I felt so much pressure to justify myself. But the video's point about stopping explaining our choices really resonated with me. Have you ever encountered this pressure to over-explain?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like a societal expectation, especially when we make decisions that deviate from the norm. But Stoicism teaches us that we don't owe anyone an explanation for how we choose to live our lives.
Right. It's about reclaiming our autonomy and recognizing that our choices are ultimately our own. We don't need anyone else's permission or approval to live authentically.
Yeah, and if someone presses you for an explanation, you can always say something like, "It felt like the right decision for me at the time," or "It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time." You don't need to go into detail or justify yourself.
And if they continue to push or make snarky comments, you can always politely but firmly change the subject or excuse yourself from the conversation.
It's about setting healthy boundaries and recognizing that you don't have to engage in conversations that make you feel uncomfortable or disrespected. You have the right to protect your energy and mental well-being.
Now let's talk about those relationships where the disrespect might be more subtle or ingrained in the dynamic. The video talks about the importance of keeping your distance from people who consistently bring negativity into our lives. But this can be tricky, especially when it comes to family members or longtime friends.
You're right, this can be a sensitive area. But it's important to remember that setting boundaries is not selfish. It's about taking care of yourself and ensuring that your interactions with others are healthy and respectful.
The video emphasizes that distancing ourselves doesn't have to be a dramatic or confrontational process. It can be as simple as gradually reducing contact, being less available, or declining invitations that don't feel good to you.
It's about being intentional with your time and energy and recognizing that you have the right to prioritize your own well-being.
And if the other person questions your distance, you can always say something like, "I've been focusing on other things lately," or "I need some time for myself right now."
You don't need to offer a lengthy explanation or justify your need for space. It's about honoring your own needs and setting healthy boundaries in your relationships. And sometimes that distance allows for personal growth and reflection, which can ultimately strengthen the relationship in the long run.
This has been an incredible deep dive into handling disrespect. And I love how we've woven in those Stoic principles throughout our conversation. It's a powerful reminder that we have more control over our reactions than we often realize, and that we can choose to respond to disrespect in a way that empowers us rather than diminishes us.
Beautifully said. And remember, these strategies aren't just about dealing with difficult people. They're about cultivating an inner strength and resilience that allows us to navigate any challenge life throws our way with grace and confidence.
It's about owning our worth, setting healthy boundaries, and living a life that's true to ourselves.
Exactly. And as the Stoics would say, it's about focusing on what we can control, accepting what we cannot, and choosing our battles wisely.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I hope our listeners feel empowered to handle those tricky social situations with a renewed sense of confidence and a bit of Stoic wisdom in their back pocket. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.